Welcome to Beacon Radio with your host, Steve Teel. Beacon Radio, delivering hope, inspiration, and change. For more information about the Beacon, log on to sabeacon.com. And now, with this week's Beacon Radio, here's your host, Steve Teel.
Listeners, I could not be more excited. Who would you just personally love to talk to more than anybody in the world? I mean, there's a lot of people. You know, I love athletes. You know, I love ministries. You know, I love musicians. There's a lot of people. But at the top of the list, I would love to talk to the foremost expert on the resurrection of Jesus Christ. This is central to our faith. This is it. And that expert is going to be with us today. That's Dr. Gary Habermas. He's helped change my life, helped inform my faith. This is so critical when you're dealing with maybe your son or your daughter, an employee, a boss who does not believe that Jesus existed or does not believe that there is evidence. This is a rational, reasonable way to present our faith, and you are going to love Dr. Gary Habermas, and truly a hero. So we're going to have a great time. So instead of going to a spot, I want to jump in and let you get to meet Dr. Gary Habermas. Again, this is Steve Teel, and you're listening to Beacon Radio. Listeners, I could not be more excited. You know, we get to talk to difference makers, and I love every single week. But this is incredible. We are going to get to talk to Dr. Gary Habermas, and I would say this is what I feel like I've heard before. You can correct me, but he is the foremost expert on the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Dr. Habermas, welcome to Beacon Radio.
Well, I'm glad to be with you. I tell people I appreciate the push there, but I tell people God raised him. I just talk about it. So that's what I'm here to do today, talk about it.
Well, I love it, and I'm really excited about that. And I want to talk just a little bit, if you're tuning in and you just want to hear about the resurrection, some of the evidence, and the minimal facts approach to the resurrection, you will not be disappointed. If you're tuning in and you're like, man, is this guy just up in the ivory tower? Is he an egghead? No, I just want to talk a little bit of hockey with Dr. Habermas, because I believe you're in the Liberty University Hall of Fame. Is that right for sports?
Yes, one of them, the club sports Hall of Fame, because the team I coached was club sports, which in hockey is huge across this nation. I mean, big-time schools up north all play club hockey, so yeah, that's what I'm in.
All right, well, just tell us a little bit, because you started it. You were the first coach, and then we will get all to the resurrection, because we just don't want to miss out on what you've got to say there.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I coached Liberty's hockey team for 9 years. I was the head coach, and it was fantastic. The best part of it easily was the fellowship with the guys. We had a great team. The last 3 or 4 years, we were ranked in the nation in the top 10.
Wow.
And that was great. And us and one other team were the only two to go to nationals the last 3 years that I was coaching.
Man.
So it was a fun time, good guys, good travel, and my players were good. We had guys all the way up to Junior A, Tier 2, which is the highest you can play and not be considered pro.
Yeah, wow.
So it's pretty good level of hockey.
Yeah, I would say so. I would definitely say so. And I read some of the colleges that you were beating and that you got to play, I think in the old arena that the Washington Capitals played in. Maybe you beat Maryland. Yeah.
We did. We played I think we played the Cap Center, 3 times.
Wow.
And I got to stay for the Caps game that came right after us. Yep.
Oh man, that's cool. Did you care about the Capitals winning the cup, the Stanley Cup, or?
I'm a Western Conference fan because my team is Chicago Blackhawks. So I like the West, but I didn't really. Until this year, I didn't really like the Caps, but I think Ovechkin has changed. I think he's not the guy he used to be, who always wanted the goals and but had a big minus rating for the plus minus they keep in hockey. But I think he's changed, and I think he's become a really good leader. And so, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay with him winning.
Yeah, okay, all right, I got you. And how are the Blackhawks looking for the future?
Unfortunately, they won 3 Stanley Cups in the last, whatever it is, 8 or 9 years. And when you do that, you have to keep really, really good players. And the short story is they have lost so many guys. 4 out of their 6 top defensemen last year, 2 of their top scorers, another one got hurt, and their goalie was out for like half the season. So they didn't even make the playoffs. They're in a huge rebuilding phase right now, and I'm a little concerned how long it's going to take.
Right, I gotcha.
So,
all right, well, man, let's dive in. Let's get after the resurrection, and can you just share with my audience who maybe has not heard what the minimal facts approach to the resurrection? Can you just start talking about it and tell us about it?
Sure, be glad to. The minimal facts argument is a name that I've given to or dubbed this method. It started back when I was actually before I was doing my doctoral dissertation, but it goes back my first investigation of it. I was writing my PhD dissertation, and the problem I was working on, because prior to my dissertation, I was in the middle of some real serious doubts about whether Christianity was true. And I went through that for a good 10 years, and then probably off and on for another 5, 6, 7, I don't know exactly, but a long, long time. And so I was kind of developing this argument selfishly. I didn't do it to show everybody how wonderful Christianity is. I did it to solve my own doubts.
Yeah.
And so I was working on this, and I thought to myself, okay, well, if I can't be sure the Bible is inspired in this, and this area, how can I still know the resurrection happened? So that's how it started, my musings on how much evidence do we have. And when it got to the dissertation, which was on the resurrection, I started saying, well, I borrow from this guy and that guy, and I'd say, these guys say we can know these facts, and these guys say we can know these facts. What facts do everybody say we could know? And I came up with this list of about a dozen things from the life of Jesus. And then I thought, well, okay, just because everybody agrees, they could all be wrong. I mean, who says they're right?
Yeah.
So then I went back to try to evidence all of those dozen-ish, let's say, historical facts, and get a basis for them. If the vast majority of scholars believe these things, there's got to be reasons for it. These guys, a lot of them are skeptics, and they don't just believe things, so what's the reason? So I went back and studied them, and that was what the dissertation was about. And then I kind of walked away from the dissertation saying, okay, well, if all we know are these dozen things, the resurrection that still happened. Well, then later, I shrunk that list very quickly. About that same time, I shrunk the list down to anywhere from 3, 4, up to about 7 facts. In other words, I didn't use all dozen. And my point was, well, even you skeptics give me a dozen, I'll be more skeptical than you. I'll just take a half dozen. And with a half dozen alone, now not just the bare facts, the bare half dozen, but the data that confirm those half dozen that everybody allows, if I've got this, I've got a resurrection. So that was the birth of the minimal facts. What's the lowest common denominator that we can learn?
Wow.
And is that lowest common denominator sufficient to rest the resurrection on it?
Wow. Okay, so, and this was a process over many years. I didn't even realize, Yeah,
it was. And I should differentiate, too. People think, sometimes critics go after me and they'll say, doesn't he know this is the informal fallacy of authority where he says because everybody believes it, he believes it? The answer is absolutely not. First of all, that is not the definition of the fallacy of authority. Of course we want authorities. Like I tell my students all the time, I don't ask my newspaper deliverer to pull a tooth for me. I go to an authority. So I care what a dental surgeon says and not what my newspaper guy says about my tooth. So we all go to authorities. That's not the issue.
Yeah.
But if you quote authorities as if that proves it, that's more of the fallacy. And because, I mean, you could survey 10 surgeons, 10 oral surgeons, and get 3 different answers. So that wouldn't solve it. The more important thing is not that everybody agrees. That was my hint that something was up, that everybody agreed. But the far more important thing is how that yes or no answer may change over the years. The far more important thing is that I won't use any fact of the 3 to 7, whatever I use, at each time. I will use nothing that is not multiply evidenced by many, many, many evidences.
Wow.
So that's the first point. Each one can be demonstrated historically by many evidences. Second point, that's why everybody concedes them.
Yeah, okay. All right. So what does this have to do with, like, the scholars? You're talking about some of them. Many of them are skeptics or whatever, but they're
right.
experts. And so, how does that come into play with what you can demonstrate?
Well, sure. I mean, I'll use the same methods they use because let's just say when I was doing my dissertation, let's say I've got umpteen different scholars, and the list of sources I've gone through is incredible. I have with this major work I'm doing, the resurrection, I think my bibliography is something like 500 pages long.
Wow.
Just the bib. So I've gone through a lot of sources. And they'll do the same thing I will. The skeptics will say, of course, more conservative people are more lenient, but the skeptics on the left, they'll say, okay, well, I don't believe in inspiration, so I think we can get to these facts based on the data we have.
Yeah.
And I'll do it the same way. I will say, if we did not know the text was inspired, how would we get to this handful of facts that I use?
Yeah.
And we do it the way any historian does it. How do you know about the Battle of the Bulge? How do you know or Gettysburg in the Civil War? You don't have inspired sources for those things, so you go back and look at the eyewitnesses, and you could do master's or doctoral theses and dissertations on this,
right?
And that's how you do it. So I use their method to get the data. I use good historical method, and with those facts, I build my case for the resurrection.
Right. All right. So can you talk us through just some of those facts? If you had a dozen that you could play with, but you get it down to how many?
Yeah, generally, at least lately.
Yeah.
I mean, let me say a word about why I use different numbers.
Yeah.
I've been as low as 3 and probably as high as 7 or 8 out of these 12 to 15 facts. In other words, I use about half of the facts that almost all scholars allow. And the number changes because nobody only grants these 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 facts. Nobody only grants those.
Okay.
Let's say nobody even grants the larger list of 12 to 15. Let's just say a skeptic might give me, I'm just making these numbers up.
Yeah.
But let's say in the New Testament there's 70 different little tiny facts, beginning with the trial and death of Jesus, all the way through what Christians call the Ascension. So you got a period there of 40-some days, and if that's all you had, was that time period? How many facts would you have? Well, separate facts, maybe, 70 things. So a skeptic might say, well, I don't believe in inspiration, so there's no way I'm going to give you 70. I'll give you 20.
Yeah.
And somebody else might say, I'm way more skeptical than you. I'm only going to give you 15 out of 70. So you can see how the percentages are going down.
Yeah.
And then somebody says, no, I'm closer to a dozen. And that's about where everybody will stop. Virtually nobody. Now note, I'm talking scholars.
Right.
I'm not talking people who blog in their basements, and they haven't finished school yet, and they set themselves up as scholars, and they say Jesus never lived. That's not the move scholars make.
Right.
And like Bart Ehrman says, he's an atheist New Testament scholar. He says, I know of two well-trained scholars with PhDs in their area who don't believe in the historical Jesus, and neither one of them teach in accredited schools, he says. But there are two of them out there who do that. But when you talk, he says, of the thousands of scholars who teach relevant subjects, history, classics, theology, religion, maybe philosophy, and work in these areas, he says that they're all going to start with the existence of Jesus and some basic facts, because I think that's where the data are. So when I say 3 to 7, I go back and forth because nobody only gives me that few.
Wow.
I'm trying to show them that I can do it with less than they're willing to grant.
Yeah.
So anyway, if I'm going to do 6, I would do these 6.
Yeah.
I would say Jesus died by crucifixion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's not evidence for the resurrection, but you need to make sure he's dead. So Jesus died by crucifixion. Secondly, afterwards, his followers had experiences which they believed were appearances of the risen Jesus. Now, in any religion, you could have someone say, yeah, I believe so-and-so's a Messiah. That's just their belief.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's true. But the second prominent one there is that his followers had experiences that they said were Jesus appearing to them.
Yeah.
And third one, their lives were totally transformed by these experiences. I mean, their life was never the same again. I mean, they didn't go back to, they went to, in John 21, they go back and do some fishing briefly. But I mean, they didn't go back to their fishing businesses, their tax collecting businesses. They didn't go back to those things.
Right.
They went to a whole new life. They became what we call missionaries and theologians. And so their lives were totally changed by this to the point of being willing to die. Now, we can talk death of the apostles if you want, but I don't require that. I just say their lives are changed so that they were willing to die. And you say, well, how do you know how they were willing to die? That's an internal psychological view. And I'd say not really. All you have to do is judge by their actions, and they continually put themselves in the face of danger, never walked away from it. That's willing to die.
Right.
Fourthly, they proclaimed this resurrection message very, very early. In fact, Bart Ehrman, even, the atheist New Testament scholar, he even dates the earliest reports of this. They're in books in the New Testament, but you have to extract them from those books. They're called creeds or traditions. He dates a bunch of them 1 to 2 years after the cross.
Wow.
So if you believe Jesus died in 30 A.D., and you said, well, hey, how do you pull this thing off? The earliest book we have is usually said to be 1 Thessalonians at 50 A.D. So 30 to 50 is exactly 20 years. Yeah. How do you pull this thing off when you don't know what happened to that gap? Well, we do know what happened to that gap because I just finished teaching a PhD course last week.
Yeah.
Now, this is for PhD students, and the whole course was on these early called creeds or traditions that are embedded in the New Testament books. And scholars, critics, non-conservatives have a way of ascertaining which of these are in the earliest period. It's very interesting how they do it. But the bottom line is that Bart Ehrman says we can get back to 1 to 2 years after. Okay, so that's 4.
That's unbelievable. I mean, Bart Ehrman, of all people, saying this.
Yep. He'd say 1 to 2 years, and he would say there's a number of texts that fit, in, not one, and the next one's 20 years later. No, there's a number that fit into that 1 to 2 year period and that are stretched out along that 20-year period until 1 Thessalonians.
Okay, and Dr. Habermas, this is important because some people who don't know these things might think, oh, this is legend that came in years later that Jesus was even resurrected. Is that the point?
Yeah, to which the answer is total baloney. You have to, let's put it this way. again, let's use the earlier example. You go to the newspaper boy and ask him if you should pull this tooth. And the guy looks in there and he goes, that looks really bad. I don't know what to tell you. Go talk to somebody who knows something.
Yeah.
But maybe that night, if that guy's got a little blog, maybe he tells a story of meeting this crazy guy who asks him if his tooth needs to be pulled. Well, he's not a scholar, but he's free to talk about it.
Yeah.
You have to go to the people who do the surgery and know what they're talking about, have years behind them, and have doctor in front of their name, and they're the ones you talk to.
Right.
Same thing with this. Not too many lay Christians or non-Christians are aware of this 20-year period and all these creeds, but there are many of them. And when even the Bart Ehrmans and the Garrett Ludemans, another atheist New Testament scholar, when these guys say that these things are early, Bart Ehrman says that it's 1 to 2 years afterwards for the story of the resurrection. Garrett Ludeman says 3 years max.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's 4. The crucifixion, real experiences, changed lives to the point of being willing to die, proclaimed early, and then 2 more. I separate Paul and James because they're very different people.
Absolutely.
And 5 and 6 would be the conversion of James and the conversion of Paul, both based on what they believed were appearances of the risen Jesus. So those 6 are the ones I use, and often when I start with them in a dialogue or an interview, the critic who's on with me, he'll just say, I'm good to go with those 6. I don't have any problems. And he may offer a caveat or 2, but he's going to be on base with them. He might offer a caveat which picks around the edges, but the bottom line is if the moderator said, well, so tell me, Mr. Atheist, are you atheist scholar now? That's the key, scholar.
Yes.
If you say, okay, you're picking around the edges, but do you concede these 6 facts or not? I think you're almost always going to get a yes.
Wow.
So, and that's the ones I need and use.
Yeah.
Now, the things around the edges are great, but that's the ones I use. And when I say that's the ones I use, just to repeat, I don't mean just 6. I mean the data critics will use to show that those 6 are true, but none of them come from saying the Bible's inspired, so I'll give you this reference, and this reference. None of the argument goes like that at all.
Right. Can you just real quick, for maybe our listeners, this is brand new to them, and they're thinking, well, why aren't you arguing that it's inspired? Could you just explain the logic of why you're just trying to go based off of the historical evidence that, most every scholar concedes?
Right. Now, if I just gave this lecture at university, which I do regularly, and if the first questioner said, man, the most incredible thing about your lecture is you're doing all this without assuming any view of inspiration, don't you believe in that?
Yeah.
I'd say you have to differentiate between what I can know for sure from my research and what I believe to be true in my personal life. Or what do I do when I go to church on Sunday morning? Do I participate in singing and praise? And if I do, why do I? This is not these 12 facts, which I reduced to a half dozen.
Yeah.
This is not all I believe.
Right.
But back in my skeptical days, that's the key here.
Yeah.
Back in my skeptical days, I was not sure how much more there was than just these 12. Now, if you talk to me, I'm like anybody who studies things. I would say, well, layer number 1, I'm sure of these 12. Second layer, there's 6 or 10 more that I'm going to have pretty close to the top layer. Third layer, there might be something here, but I'm starting to doubt. Layers 4, 5, and 6, we can't know about any of that. So I do it like anybody else does it. But back in those days, this started from my own doubts.
Right.
So once again, the key question was, if I only knew this little tiny amount, which everybody will grant me, I want to know, number 1, why will they grant it to me? And that got me into a study of what's the evidence behind it. And then, can I get a resurrection out of this? So if someone said, where are you personally? Oh, well, hey, look, I go to church, I believe this and this, and I believe this and this, and here's my greater view. I don't disparage inspiration or anything. I teach at a school where everybody's supposed to believe in inspiration. Students don't have to. They don't have to be... you talked about hockey. The last year I coached hockey, the center on my team was a junior A player from Western Canada, and he was a Buddhist.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be a Christian to go here, but the faculty believe in inspiration, and I do. That's just fine.
Right.
But I'm telling you, I'm doing, again, back to that little phrase, what's the lowest common denominator? Now, somebody would bust in here and say, yeah, but look, Jesus never lived. And that's the kind of response you just roll. Like Bart Ehrman, again, I go back to the atheist New Testament scholar.
Yeah.
He would just roll his eyes, and he'd say, buddy, you don't know what you're talking about. There's so much evidence for Jesus, you don't even want to start on this.
Right.
So, I'm not trying to say I can please all the people all the time, but I do think the minimal facts argument pleases scholars, not with my bottom line. They won't. Many of them won't like my conclusion if they're atheists or agnostics, but they will get to these facts the same way I get to these facts.
Right. All right. And real quick, Dr. Habermas, we're going to go to our halftime break, or since you're hockey, we're going to go to our first intermission. I'm Steve Teel with Beacon Radio. You can email me, steve@sabeacon.com. We've got a lot more to talk about with Dr. Gary Habermas. I've got 2 of his books that are just life changers, game changers. Right in front of me, The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus, incredible. The Historical Jesus, Ancient Evidence for the Life of Christ, critical. We'll be right back after this intermission. Beacon Radio, Steve Teel, and I have to tell you, I'm having the best time talking to Gary Habermas, and I wish you could hear some of our off-air stuff. Just one of the things I want you guys to know, and you can go right now if you're not familiar with Dr. Habermas. And the way I got familiar with him was I was reading Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ and The Case for This. I was reading J. Warner Wallace, Cold Case Christianity. I'm loving these books, but I keep seeing Dr. Gary Habermas, foremost expert on the resurrection of Jesus. I'm like, well, I better go to the source. I better start reading his stuff. And that kind of got me familiarized. And I love The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus. There's even, and listeners, if you know me, I'm a pretty simple man. I just told Dr. Habermas, and he figured it out long ago, that I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. But look, even in The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus, it included an interactive game on CD to help me with my facts. I wish I had that for seminary at Fuller, Dr. Habermas. But these books are great, but you can also go to YouTube and just Google or search YouTube for Gary Habermas and Anthony Flew debate. And one of the things that drew me, and I've watched your videos again and again because I'm just trying to take it all in. One of the things that is such a draw for me is that your personality is so winsome that you're watching this debate, and obviously, you're passionate about the resurrection of Jesus, but it's this very winsome way where you're not trying to crush or crush somebody's soul. You're just sharing the facts is what it kind of feels like. Can you talk to us for a second about that?
Yeah, I think a dialogue between two people goes a lot more smoothly. You talk about gears. Gears work a lot better when they're oiled periodically.
Yeah.
And two people who are dialoguing do a lot better when they've had time to meet each other. I try to sit down with them to dinner, call them on the phone before we dialogue. And that gets rid of a lot of the sharp stuff, well, you would know this because you're a Christian kind of comebacks.
Yeah.
And realizing you're a person and they're a person. I think the friendships that come from this, I could talk all day about just the friendship aspect of meeting these people. But I think it's a fantastic way to knock down some walls before we actually do the dialogue itself.
Right. And that's another really great thing about your book, The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus, is that you do talk about, it's not just about these facts, it's about how you present them and how you establish that friendship that you're talking about. And I just love it. I could just watch you not only debate, but teach it just the way God has made you and designed you. I just love how you share these facts.
Oh, thanks.
Oh,
thanks.
yeah.
Maybe I can also tell your listeners my website, GaryHabermas.com. That's Habermas, GaryHabermas.com. There's nothing for sale on that website. If it is, somebody else stuck it on there. I didn't.
Okay.
There's nothing for sale.
Yeah.
So it's all for education. under the books tab in the upper left, 2 of my 3 books on doubt, if you're working with somebody who's going through it.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that, Steve, you're talking about in book form, what are the minimal facts? What about the Shroud of Turin?
Yeah.
A whole lot of topics, and people can check there. That will give them background for this, too.
Right. That's a great point. And you do have, and that's why, we could have talked about 1,000 different topics. I mean, the Shroud of Turin, doubts, like you're saying, and of course the minimal facts argument and approach. All right, so can you get us back into some of the minimal facts?
Sure.
And then before we go away, I want you to share with our listeners about the book that you're working on, because I got to pre-order it, I got to get it. I'm excited already. So we can get to that, and you can kind of walk us through the minimal facts some more if you can.
Sure. What would you like to know about it? I work with these 6 facts.
Yeah.
Once again, Jesus died by crucifixion.
Yeah.
His followers had experiences which they would have told you, they believed, were appearances of the risen Jesus. They were transformed by it to the point of dying. And again, someone says, well, how do you know that was to the point of dying? Because they constantly put themselves in troublesome situations where they very easily could have been killed.
Right.
And over and over again, in the New Testament, almost 20 times we are told that believers will be raised like Jesus.
Yeah.
So the reason they would give for doing, walking into the buzzsaw, so to speak, the reason they would do it is because eternity has been secured. I have my retirement policy in place with details,
right.
And my rest of my family are there too. So we're fine. I'm just telling you to help you. And if I get killed in the process, I'm not crazy about that, but I'm doing what I need to do. So we call that transformation.
Yeah.
They proclaimed this all very, very early. Critics, I could give you a list right now of a list of critics who will grant that this material, the preaching of this material, goes back to 1 to 2 years after the cross. They call that, by the way, the name for that period is pre-Pauline. And that means when Paul came to Jesus at about +2, maybe +3 after the cross. Pre-Pauline means when Paul came to Jesus, these materials were already in existence. So as some critics say, Jesus was just a really good guy, never did anything wrong. Paul's the culprit that turned Jewish belief into a religion. Well, the problem with that kind of comeback is that these major teachings that include the deity, death, and resurrection of Jesus, what Christians call the gospel, that was there when Paul came to Jesus. That was already there.
Right.
It was pre-Pauline.
Yeah.
So that's the key.
Okay.
And then you have Paul's conversion and James's conversion, 2 skeptics who came to Christianity after they saw the risen Jesus as our best guess. Hard to tell with James, but there's no question that that's what motivated Paul's conversion.
Right.
So that's the data we deal with, and if what I just outlined, if that's true, man, you're going to have yourself in a corner, and it's really hard to debate the resurrection if you're going to grant those things. And if you're not going to grant those things, you may not grant them just to be cantankerous, and way more than cantankerous, because you don't want to believe in the resurrection. You know that's where it's going to go. So you may not grant those 12. The only problem with that is then you have to explain the literally probably 10 independent facts that back up each one of those 6.
Wow.
So you're really in the catch-22 if you don't want to believe in the resurrection.
Right. And well, could you talk us through, before we start talking about other things in your current project, could you talk us through, explain like one of these creeds and the importance of it and how we can feel fairly confident that it's, +1 or +2 or less, like Bart Ehrman says. Can you walk us through one of those?
By far the most important of the creeds, and maybe, I don't know, I don't have any data on this, but maybe the most discussed passage of Scripture in the New Testament, this most discussed by scholars, for lay people, it would be a John 3:16, Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, but for scholars, Probably it's going to be 1 Corinthians chapter 15, where Paul comes to Corinth. And they can date this, scholars can date this quite closely, that Paul came to Corinth 51 to 52 AD. So we're only 21 to 22 years after the cross. That's it, 22 years. And Paul said, when I came to you Corinthians, he's writing the book now, he says, when I came to Corinth, I gave you what I was given. I passed on this early material to you. That's 1 Corinthians 15:3. And the words, I gave you what I was given, I passed on to you what I was taught, those are crucial words. Josephus tells us that the Pharisees, and not just Pharisees, any good teacher, Josephus says they taught by repetition and by handing on what scholars said before them. That's just the normal way of teaching. And Paul was a Pharisee, he tells us that. And he came to Corinth, and he said, I gave you this material that I've been taught. Now, it was only 21 years after the cross there, 21, 22.
Yeah.
And he said, I got this earlier. When did he get it? Well, the consensus New Testament view, by far the prominent New Testament view, is that Paul received this material when he visited Jerusalem for the first time 3 years after his conversion. So if he's converted at +2, and if he goes to Jerusalem 3 years later, 2 + 3, that's 5 years after the cross, he receives this material. And he explains it. He says, I gave you the material, how that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, was buried, rose again the third day according to the Scriptures, and appeared. And here comes a list of 5 appearances, 3 to groups, 2 to individuals, and then Paul tacks his experience with Jesus onto the end. So now you have a list of 6 appearances, 3 to individuals, and 3 to groups. And if he got that 5 years after the cross, now you have to ask the question, you say, excuse me, that's when Paul heard it. Now, who gave it to him? The consensus view is that he got it from James and Peter in Jerusalem at +5. Well, if they gave him that material, guess what? They knew it before he did.
Yeah.
And so actually, you're already in the -5 stage now. And if Paul and got this from Peter and James, they would have gotten it a bit earlier. So when Paul comes to Christ, he said, I received this material. That's why scholars think it actually dates before Paul's conversion, which would be 2 or 3 years max after the cross.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
It is, and you can walk it right back. And you know what's crazy?
Yeah.
I can show you a passage in Bart Ehrman's book, Did Jesus Exist? Where he has a statement. I've been doing this, what I call timeline lecture. I've been doing it for, I don't know, one form or another. I've been doing it for almost 40 years. But in the specific walking off the timeline, I've been doing that for about 25 years. Bart Ehrman's book came out about 5 years ago, and I was just flabbergasted to see that he has a little section there where he walks the reader back the same direction.
What?
And he gets back to the cross +1 or 2. And it's not just, I mean, he puts several texts back there. The early preaching points in Acts.
Oh, my gosh.
He puts back 1 to 2 years after the cross. There's a number of them.
Yeah, that is incredible.
It is. It is, and the scholars know about it, but it's about time we preached it. Most pastors don't know about it because they're not. I mean, it's like saying, you know, if you went to medical school and you went 25 years ago and you're not in that field anymore, but you're talking to people about it, you're not keeping up with the material in the last 20 years. Well, if you stay where research is in the last 20 years, you would have picked this up. And I really, really do think it's got to work its way into preaching and to teaching and witnessing and so on.
Absolutely. I think it's just critical. And again, in this world today, I mean, dealing with people that are skeptics and don't have some of the facts, we need those facts. As Christians, we need to understand that because you're going to be dealing, whether it's your kid going to college or whether it's your boss or your employee, they don't have these facts. And if we don't have them, I mean, how are we going to help them to understand, hey, there is strong historical evidence here here it is. Here's some things. How are you going to deal with these things? How are you going to deal with that, James? The evidence is there that, he didn't believe in Jesus before something happened, something changed. How do you explain it?
Paul, right. So clearly. I mean, what was Paul doing? Paul was on the way to Damascus to at least put these people in prison, if not kill them.
Right.
He was standing there collecting the coats while Stephen was stoned. So, yeah. And if it's the center of what we believe, and it is the gospel.
Right.
Whenever the gospel is defined in the New Testament, basically we're talking about the deity, death, and resurrection of Jesus. If this is the center of your faith, and this is the, often say, yellow brick road that goes from the cross up to heaven, I mean, if this is the path to eternity, I mean, it's only the center of everything.
It is.
And if the center is that well evidenced, we should know it.
Right.
And by the way, I'll tell you this too.
Yeah.
In the ancient world, take religions, take philosophies, wherever you want to go. No other religion or philosophy has, well, let's put it this way.
Yeah.
Religions and philosophies have very little positive evidence. Everybody goes after everybody else's. The kind of apologetics most people do is, you're a loser, you're a loser, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. But how many religions and philosophies say, I'm right for these 10 reasons? Christianity, we're not trying to be cocky, I'm right. But if we have a list of 10 evidences, so be it. If this is the best faith system because of evidence, people need to know that.
Right.
And there's just nothing to compete with this kind of evidence.
Right.
So, I mean, hey, listen, a recent book came out with as major a university press as there is in the world. And the book was on miracles. And the advertisement for the book compared Jesus to Buddha. Well, here's the problem. The passages they use for Jesus can be dated very, very early. The passage for Buddha, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not a Buddha scholar, but the passage for Buddha was hundreds of years later. How do you compare them on the same playing ground and go, yep, Jesus did miracles, yep, Buddha did miracles, yep, I guess that's religion. Whatever happened to history?
Right.
Whatever happened to history lessons and checking these things out? I'm not trying to be mean to anybody, but if you're trying to talk about how do you know the basis for this, don't give Christianity the nth degree and criticize and criticize and criticize, but then when another religion comes, you should accept it at face value for what they teach. That's hardly fair.
Right, absolutely. And
I mean, who's talking fairness? Not only is it hardly fair, on the truth level, how do you compare the two?
Right.
You go, well, that's not very kind of you. I go, look, I'm not talking kind, and I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about how do you know this message versus how somebody else knows that message.
Right.
So
this is
anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
I love it. No, don't. I mean, this is a game changer for us. I mean, I think we see, and I've been in this camp too. I mean, of being passionate for Christ, and so when someone opposes us, we just go all in with our passion, but we don't have this evidence and these facts where we can, like your approach. If somebody watches you or is listening even right now, it's just the evidence. I mean, just here it is. You deal with this instead of just coming with the passion and making it so personal. We don't have to be defensive about this.
Right, and we shouldn't be, because now we're back to your, hey, shouldn't we be friends with these guys?
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Should we have dinner with them? Should we sit down? And can we do it without ulterior motives? Can I do it?
Right.
Can I just be a friend with you? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is not about, boy, I'm glad you're going to hell. Wow, why don't you look over here at me? That's not the way we do this.
Yeah.
Don't forget, this whole program is not about, I'm talking about who's got data and how do we know what's true.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who don't like what I'm saying because they don't like the end result, not because they have a very good chance of disputing the data.
Right. Man, that's good. All right, we've got maybe about 5 minutes left. I have to hear something about this new work that you're working on. I just have to. Come on, tell us about it, Dr. Habermas.
Well, all my life I've studied the resurrection. I've specialized in it. It's been my number one love. everything I can think of, and I try to go across the board. I'm not only about evidences, Steve. I try to say, what does this mean in preaching?
Yeah.
What does this tell us about theology? What theology is good and what theology is weak because of the resurrection?
Wow.
What about people in the pew? What happens when you lose somebody? I'm remarried, but my wife died in 1995 of stomach cancer. What does the resurrection say to a suffering person? Just this week, 2 days ago, my brother-in-law died.
Oh, man.
And I mean, what do you say? What do you say to people for hope? It's not just a message you go after historically.
Yeah.
We want to talk about it theologically. We want to talk about what does the pulpit look like? What do the PowerPoints look like? And what do we say to people one-on-one when they've lost loved ones? It's a huge subject. So a number of years ago, I decided it's going to be heavily historically informed, because that's where I do my work. But what if you took the resurrection from A to Z, from what happened at the beginning to how it's going to help people going through, let's say, grief? Paul says we grieve when our loved ones die. We grieve, but not as those without hope. How do we do that? So I've been working on this, what I call magnum opus, because I don't want the material to die with me. I don't know how long I have. I'm not old. I'm just old.
How old are you?
67.
Oh, you're young. Yeah.
I'm young. Yeah. But you know what I mean? The way the world looks
I do.
That's past retirement. So, and I'm still working full time. But I don't want it to die with me, so I'm putting this out there.
Oh, my gosh.
And I've got this material, and it just needs to be edited down. I have it in rough form. I've been working on it for a long time.
Yeah.
I've been working on it now for 3 or 4 years.
Sure.
And I don't know when it's going to see the light of day, but right now it's at about, I think I just counted the other day, and I think it came up to 4,200 pages. And I have to do about... Yeah, it's huge. But I have about 400 more pages to write. Maybe 5, I don't know.
Yeah.
And already this month, just in the last week and a half, I've done about, I have to stop and count, 25 pages. And it's hard. I'll work all day long, 10 hours, and I almost never do more than 3 pages.
Wow.
That's how slow it is, because when you're doing an argument, everybody hangs on your every word, and your every word better be strong, or they're going to tell you it's not.
Yeah.
So it's very, 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 very slow. So divide 3 into 400.
Oh my gosh.
And that's about how many days of work I have ahead of me.
Okay, man. I'm just very fired up, even though we might need to wait a little bit longer. So
yeah, it's going to be a little longer for sure. But
my gosh.
I have it here, and believe it or not.
Yeah.
I actually have 2 of my old grad students, one of whom has a PhD now, and one of them's finishing his PhD. They both do work on the resurrection. One has taken over my master's course, required master's course here in resurrection, so he keeps up on the data.
Yeah.
The other guy and I, either singly by ourselves or with others, we've done like a dozen articles together now on the resurrection-related topics. So I have these 2 guys to stand by, and if something happened today, if something happened to me, they are taking over the project and finishing it.
Okay.
So that's the word.
All right, and you said off air you've got other things that you want to write too.
Oh, absolutely! I'd like to write a book on these 20 passages that are in the books, but date much, much earlier, these so-called creeds that date between 30 and 50 AD. I'd like to do a whole book on it, absolutely.
Wow. All right. I want to see a list of those creeds, but I'll go do the work and figure that out. So, man.
It's not hard. If I had a list already, I would send it to you, but I don't. We can talk about that. There's something I could send you. Have a list on them. So
okay, well, you've got enough going on. But if it works out and you can point me in the right direction, I am all for it, Dr. Habermas.
All right. Well, Steve, good. I enjoyed it.
Man, this has been a blast and a blessing. And, whatever your favorite hockey player, I think I saw somewhere Bobby Hull's your favorite hockey player.
In the old days, that's what made me a Blackhawk fan. Yes, Bobby Hull. How do you get to be, at that time, how do you get a guy who still today has the fastest timed shot in history?
Wow.
And his nickname wasn't Mr. Speed Shot. His nickname was the Golden Jet because he was probably the fastest skater in hockey at that time. So how does fastest skater combine with best shot? That's Bobby Hull.
That's crazy, man. Well, as much as you look up to Bobby Hull, and man, I'm looking up to you. So thank you,
Steve. Wow,
Dr. Habermas. What a blessing, man. This you just don't know.
Had a good talk, Steve. I'm so happy to get this stuff out, let people know what scholars know, but we've got to get out into the preaching and talking to people.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, I'm Steve Teel. This is Beacon Radio. I'll have a real quick wrap up, but that is Dr. Gary Habermas. One more time, the website for us.
It's GaryHabermas.com.
GaryHabermas.com.
Right, and as I said, everything's there's nothing for sale, so everything's for study and perusal and getting up on these things.
Oh man, I'm so excited about your new book. All right, we'll go to a quick break. We'll be right back.
Steve Teel here, host of Beacon Radio. If you're a regular listener, you know I love doing this, getting to interview difference makers. Did you know I do this part-time for the San Antonio Beacon newspaper, sabeacon.com? However, my full-time ministry is Very Bold Ministries. And with Very Bold, we get to do the Peanut Butter Bowl, where we've collected almost 10,000 jars of peanut butter for chronically hungry kids. We've created resources and books for children like Bobby Be a Blessing, and our next book, Bobby Be Courageous. We go to schools, whoever will take us, ministries, hospitals, to reach all sorts of children. And we're working on some new teaching podcasts I can't wait to share with you. I also lead a Bible study for high school coaches, and we've got a lot more on the horizon for Very Bold, but only with your help. Very Bold Ministries is a 501c3 nonprofit faith support ministry, and we want you to be a part of Very Bold. Would you give an ongoing monthly gift or a one-time gift so we can just simply do what Jesus calls us to do? Now, right now, we're rebuilding our website, but you can reach out to me. You can text or call me, 210-325-1963. That's 210-325-1963, or email me, steve@sabeacon.com, and tell me that you want to be very bold. Well, that was a dream come true, getting to talk to Gary Habermas. We've got some more great interviews, so come back next Saturday noon right here on KSLR, AM 630 and AM 630theword.com. For now, you know what to do. Go and be a blessing.